Mark, really appreciate the time and the opportunity to sit down today and to take the opportunity whilst we're here together in New York to have a conversation.
Great to be here.
So maybe just to begin with, it would be good if you could give a little bit of an introduction to yourself.
Sure.
And also your background, because, and I have it here in front of me, but it's extensive. So it'd be good to hear it from your side.
You bet. Well, I'll give you some of the highlights.
Yeah.
And I really started off my career on the human capital side with PepsiCo, and then Nabisco, and then ultimately I ran the human resource function for Avis Budget Group on a global basis. And I was in that job as the CHRO for, probably about 12 years. And then after that, I then moved over to go into the general management side of it. So we did a big acquisition in Europe, and then I started off running the franchise sales business, a lot of the back office functions in terms of IT and legal, et cetera, and then moved into running operations. And I started off with the northern region, and then Europe, and then ultimately the international business, which was about a $3 billion business for Avis Budget Group. And I did that for a number of years, and then I left Avis Budget Group and started my own firm, which is called PGP Solutions. And what I do right now in my work is I really work on helping organizations develop their strategies, but also connect the human capital solutions to being able to execute and implement the strategy to drive results.
Fantastic. And specifically on the human capital side of things, is that something that you were always interested in when you started your career? It was a particular area that you had a passion for, or did you fall into that side of things?
No, it was a pretty conscious effort to move into that space, because I've always believed from an early point, especially in my career, I view it as it's sometimes the complicated and messy part of business, but it's also the part that drives it. It is when you create those connections all the way through in an organization, from the people that impact the customer to the boardroom. It's how those individuals and those teams come together to serve their customers, deliver on the results, and sometimes there isn't always a straightforward playbook. So getting the people assessed and capable and ready to be able to execute, to drive growth in their business, I always found to be the most challenging side of it. That's why I gravitated towards it, and that's why I'm still in the space.
And is it often overlooked in terms of its importance? Like often when we think about strategy, and we were talking about this just before, but often we think about the big piece, operational things that need to be done, and we need to invest in this particular area, and these are the big priorities that we need to drive. Is the people side of it often overlooked, or is that not the case?
I do think it is. I think, there are really great processes and tools, and obviously we use strategy and action tools that help you really formulate. And there's a lot of data that you can pull into the process, and there's good research and insights you can pull together to formulate your strategic direction. The challenge is when you put that up against an organization's culture, and you put that up against the capability of the executives and the individuals that are closest to the point of impact, getting them to be ready, to be capable, and to bring that level of energy and attitude that is leveraging the culture to be able to deliver is usually, sometimes we find it's really assumed and not really examined when you talk about whether your strategy is going to be successful or not.
And you obviously started your career, and you continued in your career at huge organizations, huge corporates, from PepsiCo to Avis. In organizations that are that large, that are that vast, with business units of thousands of people or even tens of thousands of people in some cases, do you think it's more difficult to capture and support that human capital piece? Or do you also have the resources and the tools at hand to be able to support those individuals? So it must be it's a beast to work within that environment.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, because usually when we work with large organizations, they have very well established tools, processes, KPIs that they expect the organization to use.
Whether that's how you run reviews to
Correct.
how you assess performance, all the way through to governance, for example. You have those structures and SOPs in place.
Absolutely. So from that perspective, you do have a little less latitude in terms of how you can bring to market a lot of your solutions. But at the same time, universally, whether you're big, medium, or small, your ability to impact and produce and share the results is universal.
Yeah.
So it just might be in terms of how you navigate with and respect the environment that you're working in terms of their history and what's important to them. But I find that has never been a barrier for us to be able to execute. It just might take a little bit longer, a few more steps on the governance side.
And what was the experience like of growing up and learning and progressing within these truly large-scale organizations? I mean, some of the larger organizations there are globally.
Yeah. Well, many years ago, and I'm not sure they use this term anymore, but some of these companies were considered academy companies. So almost when I came out with my master's degree and I started working at Pepsi, it's almost like you got another advanced degree, because you really were working with some of business's great leaders. And I learned so much back then when I was in my 20s that I still use today in terms of the wisdom, the insights on whether it was culture, whether it was driving a product forward, or whether it was how to navigate through a complex landscape in the marketplace. So the development was deep, and that's why I'm forever filled with gratitude that I started my career at a place like Pepsi and Frito and places like that.
And then you moved into the role of being a leader, a business leader within these organizations and running and managing teams. What were some of the most visceral, critical challenges that you came up against, that you experienced, that you had to overcome sitting in the hot seat?
You know, what really jumped out to me was you had individuals that usually had some significant challenge that was in front of them, whether it was a departmental challenge, a macro organizational challenge. And what people were really looking for is, how do you break that down into its components so I can be successful and help deliver what I need to do for my team and for the broader business? So there's an element of keeping things as simple and as straightforward and as measurable as possible, but doing it in a way where it's wrapped in a level of treating people in an inclusive way with a lot of dignity and respect, to create that engagement, which really accelerates your momentum to drive results.
How do you do that in an organization which is hundreds strong, if not thousands?
Well, what I have found to be a successful formula is I always spend time with those that are closest to the customer. Doesn't matter what their role is. And it's a physical presence where you actually see their work, see what they do. And I remember examples, whether it was riding a route with a route salesman at Pepsi, or even when I was with Avis, I spent time in a vehicle driving from customer to customer with a shuttler who is responsible for moving cars. And some of the best ideas I got were some of those interactions. And then when those at the front line see you spending time, that you care enough to spend time with them to understand their work and how it impacts their day-to-day job, and then you can start to draw connections on how that can impact the broader business. And being able to say you've done that, not just in words, but in deeds, it gives you credibility. And then that credibility carries through with messages when you talk about either jobs you need people to do or goals you need them to accomplish. because it's from a place of credibility and insight in terms of being with those closest to the customer.
So I suppose in your role and for others who lead organizations, you almost have two customers. You have the end customer who's leveraging your products and services, and then you have your internal customer, which is the individuals and the teams that you lead. Because you need to understand, how do I best position myself? How do I best serve and support them to equip them with the skills and the tools to serve the overall customer?
That's right. Yeah. And it's creating an environment where they're willing to give you what I call their discretionary effort. So they don't need to because it's not in their job description, but they choose to and they want to because they want to work for a leader or an organization that recognizes their unique value, their unique importance to the business.
What are the most rewarding parts of sitting in that type of seat and taking those type of decisions?
You know, it's something that has always stuck with me. It's when you see someone achieve something on their professional goals that they may have thought they never could, but they did for either process, tools, programs, effort, development you've put in place to help them rise to that level. And then they have that gratitude that they appreciate the fact that either you as a leader or the organization has invested in them to give them that ability. So seeing people achieve their goals that they never thought possible, by far the most rewarding thing.
And is there one instance that sticks to your mind as maybe a particular challenge, strategic challenge that you had to overcome in one of those roles, maybe whilst you were at Avis, for example?
Yes.
I'm sure there are a few.
There are a number.
I'm sure there are a number.
There are a number.
You spent long enough there for...
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say one of the things that really stuck out to me, we made a conscious effort to really, in the car rental business, it can be very commoditized based on when I ran Europe and a customer would go into Fiumicino Airport in Rome and there's 20 car rental companies to choose from. And so you really need to think about how you distinguish yourself. And we decided to make Net Promoter the area that we were going to separate ourselves. Okay. And so one of the things that I'm very proud of that we delivered is our Net Promoter score when I first started running the European business. Our Net Promoter scores across Europe were single digits, in some cases negative. That bad.
Yeah.
And through a very planful, strategic approach for how we look at what the customer values, what the capabilities are needed inside the organization to deliver on that, we looked at everything: tools, technology, our customer service efforts, and how we then rebuilt piece by piece the experience for the customer. So when I left the business, Fiumicino, London, other major European airports, they were in the 40s and 50s from a Net Promoter perspective. And at the time, our gold standard was Apple, which was a 60 NPS, and we were right up there, right with them. So it was a significant cultural and ultimately customer swing in the viewing the value of the product and the service.
And you were right up there near them or with them for a product and service which unfortunately is often perceived as
it's not a great experience.
No, you often, you obviously lived and breathed it, but for me, when I think about going and get a rental car, you often think, probably not going to get the car that I wanted, not going to get the car I booked, is the car there, I wait a long time. And obviously you're fighting against that when you're trying to develop an incredible experience for the customer.
No question. And a lot of that piece, jumping back to the human capital part of it, was really helping our frontline employees realize that their job wasn't necessarily just to clean the car. Their job was to have that product or that service ready for that customer on what could be one of those most important moments of their life. They're traveling in for a wedding, for a funeral, for an important business meeting. And how do you make sure you deliver something that we're all proud of in the moments that matter for customers? That's a very different narrative than I just have to clean X amount of cars and have them ready.
Completely. Like even I remember for me, one of the first trips I went on with my now wife, then girlfriend, we went to Los Angeles, and we really wanted, for some reason, a red Mustang convertible. That's what we really wanted. And when we got there, the car comes out, and it's not a Mustang and it's not red, but we booked that car, and it changes the experience completely.
Right.
In the end, we got a red Mustang because we complained, but as you said, it's a completely different mindset to, I need to clean these wheels.
That's right.
To, I'm providing the customer with what they really need want in this particular moment.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, obviously, you play on a very different side of the fence. So you support organizations and a large number of organizations in very different industries with some of these challenges and with some of these pains that they come up against. What are the biggest challenges you see that maybe you weren't aware of now that you're looking from the outside in, as opposed to sitting in that seat as you did before?
Well, I do think, I worked in organizations where I always had a clear understanding of what the baseline was.
Okay.
And so when I step into new organizations, you realize that the baseline, and what I mean by that, it could be the sophistication of the tools and processes. It could be where the culture is. It could be where customer perception is. So one of the things that I find you almost have to really get an assessment for is what are the baselines in all of these areas, so you kind of know how deep or not deep the hole is in any one specific area. So then you can start to formulate the right solution that is fit for that customer versus just a generic approach.
And how do you find the experience of working closely with business leaders? And you have some skin in the game, but of course it's a very different experience to what you had before.
What I really am loving about it is I get to bring to bear what I enjoy most, which is helping leaders and helping organizations punch through to a new level. And what I appreciate also from where I sit right now is when it's your P&L, when it's your daily sales numbers, you can quickly get distracted because you have to fight a fire or you have to deal with a governance issue. And what I find in working with executives that sit in a chair I used to sit in, I find where I can say to them, listen, I get it. You go deal with what you've got to. I'm going to be able to keep working with the people that work for you because making that connection at all levels in the organization is something I truly enjoy. And so it allows me to go deeper and to have an extra pair of eyes for that executive, knowing I've sat in their chair before, and be able to bring them back when they can come back up for air, be able to give them the feedback of what I've seen, what we've done, and what they need to do specifically. So it becomes a more targeted solution for them because they've got a plate full of activities. And so for me to be able to help them accelerate their impact while keeping things moving without getting distracted with the challenges of running their daily business, I find it tremendously rewarding for myself.
And last question, and this may be entirely recency bias, but when you look at the world in which business is conducted or life is conducted today, very volatile, very uncertain, very complex, and incredibly fast moving. Even if we look at AI and the changes that AI are having in terms of how we conduct business, how we run teams, how we hire, and so on. Again, could be recency bias, but do you think that world is a more challenging world today compared to 10 to 15 years ago to be a business leader, or am I just seeing it through the prism of the world in which we live right now?
No, I think it is more complex, no question. And You not only have kind of macroeconomic challenges that you've got to deal with, or political challenges that the world is navigating through, but you also have your employees' expectations. The speed at which everything is moving is so much faster, and the expectations are so much higher. And I think the only thing that when I work with organizations, I really try and work with them to embrace it, because like even with AI, you've got some organizations that are almost nervous about what it can mean or do when you start talking with their teams. But what I really encourage people is just lean into it, wrap your arms around it, find the ways that it can add value right away, and then start to pull your people into where the future is going. And that takes away some of the anxiety, but there's no question the speed at which things are changing and moving significantly different than when I started.
Look, Mark, really appreciate the time. Really fantastic
to
sit down and chat, and very, very interesting conversation. And we'll be speaking further together soon.
Great.
But for today, very much appreciate it.
Great spending time with you, Ben. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.